How's it going, everybody? Today we are going to be doing a pretty fun video. So what I wanted to do today is kind of do a comprehensive comparison of the different disc golf manufacturers out there. The idea behind this video is to find which manufacturer suits you best. There's not necessarily one that trumps them all, sorry to disappoint, but I am going to rate them based on certain scales. The criteria that I will use is aesthetic, so how nice does it look, the theming of the discs, the colors of the plastic. Then I'm also going to go on feel, just straight up how does the plastic feel. Then I also have selection, what are your options as far as molds and plastic. And then the fourth one, maybe the most important, that's consistency. If I buy two of the same disc, how much alike will they be? So I'm going to go out to the field, go over each manufacturer individually, throw a few discs, give some demonstration, and then I'll come back here and give a final score for each company. Hopefully this video will highlight some of the strengths and weaknesses of each of these major manufacturers, as well as maybe point you towards one you hadn't thought of before. But without further ado, let's get out to the field and let's check out these different companies and what they do.
All right, so let's start with Inova. And Inova is a great one to start with because a lot of people would consider it the original golden standard of what a disc golf disc should be. Many of you are familiar with this brand because it's the first one you picked up. Their starter sets can be seen in sporting goods stores all over the country and really probably all over the world. And really they've dominated the market for the last few decades due to having some very dominant players such as Ken Climo and Paul McBeth over the last few decades, and just being one of the first people to the market in general. Many people would consider the founder of Inova, Dave Dunapace, to be one of the most important people in our sport's history because he created the beveled edge disc that would push our sport forward to where it is now. Inova has a ton of strengths and a ton of things that you can like about it. One of the best things they have is arguably the best staple lineup of any company out there. Everybody that throws Inova knows about these 5 discs right here. I'm talking about the AVR, the Rock, the T-Bird, the Firebird, and the Destroyer. Those 5 discs alone can be everything you need in your disc golf bag. You may just have some that are in different stages of wear. Inova has created some of the most iconic discs of all time and some of the best selling. Plus, they can boast that their putter, the AVR, their flagship putter, has won more world titles than any other. But like I said, a lot of their statistics and dominance has to do with the fact that they were first to the market or very early to the market. So are they actually good discs, or is it just that? I genuinely believe that Inova makes the best plastic on the market, to my hand feel, when it's at its best. It doesn't always mean it's the most consistent, especially these days, but when it's at its best, and when you give me a good run of a star plastic like this, I don't like any disc better. So if you're looking to go with a brand that has been proven through the test of time, look no further than Inova. You really can't go wrong. They have a huge selection of discs, tons of different plastics as well. And like I said, if you just start with these 5 molds here, you really can't go wrong. One of the biggest kind of points for Inova is that other companies have been trying for years and years just to replicate discs like that Firebird. You'll hear a lot of people talk about, oh, it flies like this, and they'll name an Inova mold because they were the first ones to create such great molds that other companies have been trying to replicate them, and that's how they built their companies. Another mold like that is the Destroyer. Everybody wants to make a disc like the Destroyer for good reason. Reliable, overstable, and glides forever. Incredible disc. Another cool thing about Inova is they've taken popular molds such as their T-Bird, and then they even created spin-off molds like the T-Bird 3 that are a little bit faster and a little lower in profile. And they also fly amazing. All right, now let's talk about arguably the biggest competitor to Inova, especially these days, and that is Discraft. Now, the funny thing about Discraft is it actually got a very big leapfrog off of something that Inova created, and that was Paul McBeth. Everything changed around 2019 when Paul McBeth left Inova after a long, successful career with that company, switched to Discraft, and all of a sudden Discraft, which was a popular brand but not nearly as big as Inova before, it exploded after that. Nowadays, at least in the area I'm in on the East Coast, I see more Discraft than anything else in people's bags. And it's not just all hype. They are a tremendous company. They were making good discs before Paul McBeth went there and blew them up, and they're still making good discs now. There are a few things that Discraft has always had going for them, even before they got super mega popular, and one of those is the buzz. A lot of people, well, many people will tell you that this is the best mid-range of all time, and I don't really care to argue with them because it certainly is one of the best ones, and it's been around for a long time. This one here is the 20-year anniversary mold of this disc. Another fantastic mold that they were early to the game in and really set the scene for in disc golf, set the standard, I should say, is the Zone. This is really the mother of all overstable approach discs. It was the one that did it the best earliest on, and similar to that Destroyer from Inova, a lot of companies have been trying to create a disc just like this, including Inova, who came out with the Toro not too long ago, kind of meant to be a zone. Discraft has similar strengths to Inova. They do have a lot of history. They have a lot of selection in different plastic types. I would say their feel isn't quite as good as Innova's, at least at the top end, but I would argue they may be slightly more consistent. One thing that Discraft does have that few other companies can even compare to, and certainly this one plastic blend nobody can compare to, that is their swirls. So Discraft was one of the first companies to really start implementing awesome swirls consistently into their discs, not just for special runs. I mean, look at this ESP right here. That's a disc that you can find very commonly in the Discraft lineup. They're incredible with the swirls that they do. And recently, they've done this Jawbreaker plastic. I'm sure you saw it on that Wasp. But look at this buzz. This is the Tour Series for this year. This is the Z-Flex Jawbreaker. And I mean, this stuff is just on another level. So that is one thing that Discraft has done. Their stamp design is top-notch. Their plastic swirls and looks are top-notch. So if you're looking for aesthetic, look no further than Discraft. They are going to have a ton of options. Your bag is going to look super, super cool. And hey, the discs fly fantastic as well. I mean, there's a reason people like the buzz. It just goes straight, little fade at the end when it's new. It rocks. It always finds its way back into my bag. And another disc that always finds its way back into my bag is the Zone. Super overstable, reliable, but goes pretty far, especially for what's considered a putter. Such a fantastic disc. And Discraft is continuously pushing the boundary, creating new molds. This here is a Venom, a newer mold they've made, and this is the Anthony Barella Tour Series edition. So they're still coming out with good molds to this day. That's real nice and overstable. I mean, seriously, this should be in an art museum. All right, now we're going to talk about maybe the most controversial and certainly the most relevant right now manufacturer, and that is MVP/Axiom. So for those of you who don't know, MVP and Axiom are part of the same company. They just have different like branding between them, but it's made by the same people. MVP actually makes a lot of different companies' discs, but we're going to talk about the gyro stuff. The recent surge of popularity in MVP plastic is honestly a testament to their marketing strategy and the players that they were able to bring in. But if you don't really know about this company, basically they were one of the first ones to mainstream this gyro disc technology, where you have an outer mold that wraps around the inner mold. It's called overmold plastic. I guess I should call it the overmold. Basically their whole claim is that because they do that, their manufacturing process, they're increasing the gyroscopic effect that happens on the disc, therefore resulting in more glide, more distance, etc. Now, their science in theory is absolutely correct, but every disc company utilizes the gyroscopic effect. They do that by putting more weight on the rim than on the middle of the disc. MVP is just claiming they do it better with their manufacturing process. Now, you can argue around in circles all day with people whether or not that is actually true, whether or not these discs go further, but what I can tell you is whether they go further or not, this is a fantastic product. Because of the weird stigma around MVP, it wasn't always super popular, but after bringing in James Conrad and then not long after bringing in Simon Lizotte and now Eagle McMahon, everybody is throwing this stuff. It's flying off the shelves, you can't keep it in stock, and people are all clamoring to try it out. Plus, they're making super cool and innovative molds like the Glitch and the Watt that are getting everybody super excited to throw this stuff. So, is it overhyped? Personally, I don't think there's much stock to place in the whole gyro thing. I don't think that's the reason you choose this plastic, but I do think you choose it because it's one of the most consistent products on the market. I see a lot of disc shipments come in because I work for a disc golf retailer, and there's inconsistencies. It's tough to manufacture a disc, but when an MVP shipment comes in or an Axiom shipment, it's really hard to spot the difference from disc to disc. They've got their process down, and they're creating a very, very consistent product to where if I've got this Terra here and then I've got a whole nother box of them, they're all going to look very much the same, which, like I said, sounds expected, but you'd be surprised how difficult it can be to find a consistent looking and especially flying product in disc golf sometimes. MVP is still a relatively newer company, so they're still fleshing out their lineup, which means they have a little less options to choose from. Same goes with plastic. I don't think they've completely delved into all the different plastics they could do yet. However, they are really pushing the boundaries. They're doing different kinds of overmolds. Like this Pyro here is their prism plastic, where it has a clear outer mold and inner mold, which is really cool. They also do things like fission plastic, where they're trying to like implement air bubbles into it. So they are innovative. I think that MVP in the next 10 years is going to be a company that is on par with any of the bigger companies out there. And yeah, it's good stuff. I've enjoyed throwing it. I really have. I'd recommend it. This Fission Photon was actually one of the first discs I tried from MVP, because people said it just flew so far for an 11 speed, and it really does. I mean, look at that thing go. Holy smokes. Almost to the woods, just effortless. And I mean, they really set the world on fire when they came out with the glitch. Basically a catch disc, disc golf disc hybrid. This is a foundation stamped one we ran. And just a blast to throw. I love throwing these on the course. I also love taking them to the beach and tossing them with my brother. They just glide and glide and glide. Such a unique and cool disc. MVP is a company to get excited about. If you haven't tried it yet, there's a lot of reasons to. Okay, next we're going to talk about Prodigy, and I think this is one of the most interesting ones to go over. Prodigy has had an interesting past. When this company first arrived on the market around 2013, 2014, they proceeded to jump in and sign one of the greatest disc golf teams we'd ever seen. Every star player, it seemed like, was moving over to the Prodigy. But after not a ton of years and not a ton of success within those players necessarily, a lot of them started to move on, and the brand kind of got pushed to the back burner. However, just recently, they had a stretch where they had Gannon Buhr, Isaac Robinson, Ezra Robinson, Kevin Jones. They used to have Chris Dickerson, so they were able to kind of reload on stars, and they've had a lot of players had a lot of success with their plastic in recent years. Now, their perception was not helped by the Gannon Buhr lawsuit that went down. If you haven't checked that out, you just search that on YouTube, and there's plenty about it. But I think Prodigy is still misunderstood. I have a bit of a soft spot because I threw Prodigy in college. I was a Prodigy-sponsored player. And I think at the core of this company, there are some really good people. I know Will Schustrick is really involved at Prodigy, and he is an awesome guy. And they do make some really good products. They had a few years there where things were getting really inconsistent. People were complaining about the flashing and such. But I think they're really starting to turn things around, and they have some really cool ideas, such as the NHL licensed and collegiate licensed discs that they're moving on with now. But as you can see, like, I mean, this is their Spectrum plastic, just some awesome swirls, some really cool artwork that they've done. And then they're doing really neat things like these discs for Isaac Robinson, the Archive here, which is an awesome mold. They've mixed up their manufacturing to where they've got some stuff being manufactured overseas instead of all in their factory. And I think that's kind of helped them a little bit, and their consistency is getting better. So if you haven't tried Prodigy, if you just heard bad things about it, they do have some awesome molds that you could be missing out on, such as this Archive and such as that P3X, or sorry, PX3. I always get that confused. I mean, you can't forget that Gannon Buhr won a major throwing Prodigy. You know, it's a disc brand that has a weird public perception, but an insane track record on the tour. And yeah, this PX3, these things are just money. Nice and overstable. You can rip over on them. I'm gonna have to bag one of those again. Don't give up on Prodigies just because of what you heard. Go into a store, you know, if you're worried about the consistency, go into a store where they have it in stock, feel some different molds, and try one out, because some of the most favorite molds I've ever thrown in my life have been Prodigy molds. So the last major manufacturer we're gonna unpack here is Trilogy. Now, unfortunately, I can't really call it Trilogy anymore because it's no longer just three companies. It's better to call it House of Discs, because that is the company that owns all the other ones now. But if you're not familiar with the story, let me brush you up a little bit. For most of the last decade, we've called Trilogy, the three companies being Westside, Dynamic Discs, and Latitude 64. We grouped them all in because they were all manufactured under one big company. Recently, a larger company, House of Discs, swooped in, bought that, and then added to their collection Discmania and Castoplast. So the reason I'm grouping these in a video like this is because all of their plastic, while may have minute differences and companies will try to deny that it's the same, it is ultimately all House of Discs made plastic, and therefore is going to have a very similar feel. So there's a lot of pros to that. Because there's so many companies grouped under this one plastic feel, if you like the plastic feel, you have endless options. I'm not even going to rate selection or aesthetics for this grouping of brands because you can literally get any aesthetic or selection you could ever want amongst all these different discs. It really just comes down to, do you like the plastic that they're making? Because there's going to be a mold you like, and there's going to be a design you might like. I will say some of the stuff coming out, specifically from like Latitude 64, some from Dynamic as well, is artwork comparable to Discraft. Maybe not quite there, but comparable. They came out with Orbit plastic not too long ago, and it's incredible. But yeah, I've grown to love a ton of molds from these different companies. The Judge, one of my favorite putters of all time. The Pure, another putter that I love to throw. I used to bag this Westside Disc Bear. I think Westside is probably the one that gets overlooked the most, but they have a ton of great plastic. And don't forget that Matty O won the MVP Open last year throwing Westside plastic. Discmania. Discmania is an interesting one because they obviously used to be manufactured by Inova. They moved over to this, and they're still making great plastic, and they have a very, very fun vibe. And it's fun to be in the ecosystem of Discmania. The stuff that they create, it's very clean. They have a lot of good molds still, and I recommend checking that out. And then Castaplast is kind of more of a niche one. I've got the Berg here because this is a disc that most people would know from Castaplast, but all of their molds are good. I've probably been throwing a Judge longer than any putter out there, really. I mean, they're just so consistent. They're point and shoot discs. They're just money. I still have not decided how I feel about the Berg. I don't think I'll ever bag one, but it doesn't glide a ton. I guess I get why people like it.
All right, now that we're back in from the field, we're going to give out our final scores. First, we're going to start with Inova. Inova is definitely one of my favorite brands, but there's still room for improvement. For their aesthetic score, I give them a 7 out of 10. I think they have a very clean look. I wasn't a huge fan of the rebrand, but they do have a talented design team, and when they really try, they can make some really cool looking discs. Their Halo plastic was certainly a big part of that. For consistency, I'm only giving them a 6 out of 10. I think this is something that's happened in recent years, but sometimes it can be difficult to find that perfect run of an Inova plastic that you really love. And it's so frustrating because the best of the best when it comes from Inova is very tough to beat. And that's why for feel, I'm giving Inova a 10 out of 10 because when it's at its best, this plastic feels just so incredible. It's such a premium feel in the hand. I've really yet to find anything I like as much. And keep in mind, all these are very subjective to me, but I have felt a lot of plastic, but ultimately my hand is different than yours, so that is just going to be up to preference. For selection, I'm giving Inova a 9 out of 10. They've been around a long time. They do have a ton of molds. They may not come out with them as frequent as other companies anymore, but it doesn't change the fact that they've had 30 years worth of making so many different discs. Next, we're going to talk about Discraft. For aesthetic, I'm giving Discraft a 9 out of 10. I mentioned those swirls. The designs they're coming out with lately are top notch. For consistency, I'm going to give them a 7 out of 10. Just not quite all the way there yet. Sometimes it can be difficult to find two discs that are flying exactly the way you want, especially in some of the driver molds, but a lot of their flagship molds like the Zone and Buzz, they do have down pretty well. I'll give them that. For feel, I'm going to give them an 8 out of 10. They do have some nice plastic blends, although some people will complain that Z and ESP plastic can be a little bit slick. And then for selection, I'm going to give them a 9. They've been around a long time. They've got a ton of new molds as well, and there's tons to choose from. All right, for MVP/Axiom, for the aesthetic, I'm going to give them an 8 out of 10. They do have a pretty cool thing going with the gyro. I have found that recently, as they've worked in more artwork into some of their limited stuff, they've done a really good job, so that score could definitely increase. Consistency, I'm giving them a 10 out of 10. I really haven't seen anything like it. They do such a great job. For feel, I'm going to give them a 7 out of 10. I think their plastic could use a little work. It's also very flat up until Simon joined and created the time lapse. A lot of their discs didn't have a lot of dome, but that seems like something they figured out and are improving on now. And then selection, I'm going to give them a 6 out of 10. They are a newer company. They don't have as many plastic blends and disc molds yet, but that's really just a matter of time. They do come out with a decent amount of molds here and there, so hopefully that'll increase as time goes on. Now for Trilogy, like I mentioned, selection and aesthetic, I'm not going to rate them because they have like an unlimited selection for both of those things, but for feel and also for the consistency, I will rate that. I'm actually going to rate those both a 9 for Trilogy. I think they do have really good feeling plastic. People can say things about the durability of the plastic. That's neither here nor there, but the feel of the plastic is really good, and they have a ton of different blends to choose from as well. And the consistency, I give a 9 out of 10 because As some people know, their process is completely robotic. A lot of the Trilogy, I think all of the Trilogy manufacturing is done completely robotically. At least the main core Trilogy plastic that's manufactured at the Latitude facility, which means the consistency is very tough to beat because it's done to the most precise margin. And yeah, Trilogy plastic is nice and consistent. And last but not least, I'll talk about Prodigy. For aesthetic, I'm going to give Prodigy an 8 out of 10. Their Spectrum plastic they've been turning out as of late has really bumped them up on this scale. Early on, I think their plastic was clean but a little boring, but they are really starting to figure out the swirls. They also have a new fractal plastic coming out that is really, really nice. Consistency and feel are both a 6. I think this is the biggest thing that Prodigy needs to work on because when they get it right, it's very, very good, but it's been a little streaky here and there, and that's been their biggest issue. And then for selection, I'm going to give them a 7. This is another company that they came out with some molds that they discontinued early on that were kind of favorites, and they're slowly kind of finding their way through how they want to build their lineup. They've gone in a couple different directions, but there is a decent amount of molds to choose from, and their selection has gotten better over the last few years. Now, like I said, there are so many more companies to choose from than just these few here. These are just some of the major ones, and there are a lot of companies that are actually manufactured by these, such as ThoughtSpace Athletics and Mint Disc are manufactured by MVP. You also have Millennium Disc, which is manufactured by Inova. So if you really look into that when you're looking at those smaller manufacturers, you can definitely find ones that if you like the feel of Inova plastic, for example, you're going to like Millennium because they're made by the same company. Another example would be DGA is also manufactured by Discraft. So if you like Discraft plastic, you will probably like DGA plastic. There are only a few companies outside of these ones that are actually manufacturing their own plastic. You've got some companies like Lone Star Disc that are newer to the market, and then you've also got really small kind of startup ones like Trash Panda, for example, that recently, shout out to them, recently just started making their own disc via their own injection molding machine that they made. So that is a tough market to break into, but as more people do, we'll get more different plastic blends to try, and I think it's great for the sport. And of course, I am sure plenty of people disagree with my ratings on here and my opinions of these companies, and that's perfectly fine. I never would claim to be the expert on all things disc golf. I've played for quite a while. I've seen a lot of discs, but of course it's subjective. So let me know, which company do you think I was wrong about? Which company do you love to throw that I didn't talk about in this video? Let me know down below in the comments. Make sure to like this video and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I will see you next Monday with another upload.